Hello and welcome. Well, we are just a few hours away from that big moment when Arun Jaitley is going to be standing up and presenting his budget, and expectations are running high. As we've been discussing, this could be a very important budget to try and really set the stage for a wave of investment in India, make in India, try and get a lot of people excited about the India story. India is the fastest growing economy in the world right now. Could be doing even better. That's what the economic survey says. So what is it that the finance minister can do tomorrow to try and ensure that the India story doesn't just stay on track, but actually proceed? So we've got some of the top experts in various areas whom we're going to get to talk specifically about their areas or sectors, and also in general about what the key expectations are, what they would like to hear and not hear in the budget speech tomorrow. Let me start by welcoming Mr. Harsh Neotia, who's the president of FICCI, joining us from Kolkata. Great to have you with us. M.K. Venu is with us here, the founding editor of VIA, has been looking at many budgets with us for the last few years. Arvind Gupta, ID cell head of the BJP, is with us, as is Sanjay Jha, spokesperson of the Congress Party. Mr. Subhash Lakhotia is one of the top tax and investment consultants, has been telling, for many, I think more than 20 years, I've been doing budget programs with you. I mean, you've been telling us exactly what's going to be happening from a personal taxation point of view. And it's a great privilege to have with us Virendra Kumar, who knows more, who's forgotten more about mutual funds than the rest of us will ever know. So you can, if you want to know where you should invest your money, ask him, talk to him, and he will give you exactly the right advice. And joining us, Ashwajit Singh, MD of IPE Global, and we also have with us Sudhir Kumar, farmer leader, member of the Uttar Pradesh Planning Commission. Thank you all so much for being with us. Let me kick off, first of all, with basic key expectations and the sort of direction that we think the budget is going to take, and then we'll zero in sector by sector. So why don't I start with you, Mr. Neotia, the broad direction, because lots of people are guessing and speculating, and the consensus, or at least the majority view that I've heard, seems to be fiscal consolidation, but don't get crazy about it, is what he's likely to do. Pro-poor budget, and make sure that the image of the government is set as being pro-poor, and try and do things to show that ease of business is still on track. Is that roughly the direction that you would expect, or would you expect things slightly different?
Two broad areas from a business point of view: the ease of doing business and the cost of doing business. When we talk about ease of doing business, it is stepping ahead with the reform process, continuing to look at various issues which are niggling. There are issues in the Companies Act, there are various other issues that are not consistent. For instance, some provisions of SEBI are not consistent with Companies Act, etc. So it is about cleaning these out and making the ease of business more better, and it's in line with the government thinking when they are also looking at bringing down India's ease of doing business index ranking from 136 down to below 50. The other is the cost of doing business, and in cost of doing business there are two broad costs. One is the cost of infrastructure, so therefore public investment should be continued in infrastructure. A lot of good work has happened on the roads and railway front, and I think we need to step up this expenditure so that we can bring our infrastructure up to speed. The other, of course, is the transaction cost and interest cost.
That's not entirely in his hand, of course, but the extent to which fiscal deficit comes down and things like that, you might have more room for Raghuram Rajan to do something about interest rates.
Vikram, I remember when you were in Davos, I think Jaitley told NDTV that the two main challenges that he'll be grappling with in this budget, generally in the economy. One challenge, he said, was a near collapse of rural demand, which is a story that we've been seeing for the last 15-16 months. Tractor sales, two-wheeler sales, all negative growth, right?
Right. And
rural wages growing at an all-time low, less than 2%. And during the boom times, it used to grow at 17%. And some economists misled the government into believing that high rural wage growth was actually feeding into inflation, one-to-one correlation, which is all wrong. Okay. Now there's a need to, Jaitley himself said there's a need to improve rural demand.
So rural in general and rural demand.
Rural demand, and the other big component, he said, was that the banking system, there was so much bad assets in the, bad loans in the banking system, which is the main reason why banks are unable to lend, even if Raghuram Rajan reduced interest rates, which the RBI governor has been saying, that they're becoming difficult for banks to to lend, because nearly 15% of the total bank credit loans are considered stressed today, about 10 lakh crores, whatever the figures the RBI or government might say. So these are the two big things I expect.
So rural sector, you're saying focus on the rural sector and rural demand in particular.
And on the banking side.
Banking side, recapitalization of banks is something that we have to take a look at.
So far the government has been talking incrementally about recapitalizing. I think this budget will have something big on banking.
Okay, fine. Broad thrust, Arvind?
I think the pro-poor part of the budget that everybody is saying is going to be clearly highlighted in the budget. Bringing up the agriculture.
Pro-poor, but if I could just pro-poor from the point of view of specific announcements or sops or whatever for the poor, or you can sound pro-poor by really soaking the rich by doing some, hiking taxes.
I think it's the actual walking the talk on being pro-poor and more thrust on the rural side, the agriculture productivity side. That's something to be seen. The services sector has, as the economic survey showed, has done very, very well, and that should continue to become the pillar. But the agriculture growth rates that are, after two successive droughts, I think there needs to be a lot of focus on the agriculture side and the productivity of the agriculture sector.
So pro-poor, rural focus, and pro-poor, you're saying pro-poor, not just anti-rich.
Yeah, pro-poor. And they're two different things.
Right.
And I do want to add to that, I think there's the PSU revitalization, which has already started, but I think needs to be consolidated a lot more in this budget, and we hope to see that from the Finance Minister tomorrow.
Okay, Sanjay Jha, from a view in the opposition, your take on what you think the thrust of the budget is going to be?
Right from the very beginning, Vikram, we have been saying that rural distress has been alarmingly rising, and this government has been very nonchalant where that has been concerned. You just look at the agricultural GDP growth rate. It was negative. It is at best around 1.1%. And, with falling commodity prices and the fact that you have roughly 302 out of 678 districts having declared drought, and this government having reneged on its promises of the minimum support prices sector, I think it's aggravated the rural demand, rural wages, which are at less than 3.8%.
So keeping the politics out of it, Sanjay, what you're really saying is that a focus on rural is what should be there in the budget.
Absolutely. And one more point, Vikram, I think this government's singular failure has been that despite, the massive tailwind of oil prices being 1/4 of what they were during the time of the UPA, to be not able to leverage the huge savings it's had and to create, public spending in a more positive way, which would, boost either private consumption or investment demand, I think is singular. I think it's been a very strong failure. I hope Mr. Jaitley does something to reverse that trend. Although I think they keep talking about fiscal consolidation, but I think whether they go with a fiscal deficit of 3.5 or not is something that at least I would like to see him, tinker around with, because it's one.
You would like to see a lower fiscal deficit. You would like to see him sticking to 3.5, or are you okay if he says, well, maybe we'll do it at 3.7 for the coming year?
Given the state of conditions today, a fairly dormant economy, I mean, we might be saying that we are better off compared to the rest of the world, but that's nothing to gloat over. But public spending, creating capital assets, welfare expenditure, which is so critical in terms of Manrega, etc., which has resulted in lower rural demand, are something that Mr. Jaitley should definitely consider.
Okay, before I come to Sudhir to get a take on that, Mr. Jaitley, I just wanted to ask you your reaction to that on the fiscal deficit point, because you were referring a little bit to the cost of doing business. For the previous year, let's assuming he keeps it at 3.9, and let's go with that assumption. For the coming year, would you like to see 3.5 or 3.7?
We should keep the momentum of public expenditure, because that is very important to finally crowd in private investment. And therefore, from a FICCI point of view, we have argued that if that means a slight slowing down of the fiscal deficit reduction target by a couple of points, like going down to 3.7 instead of 3.5, that might be something that we should look at.
Okay. Ashwajit, would you broadly agree with that?
We've been talking about make in India. I have nothing against that, but I think it's about time we make India, which is really where we need to come from. And given the fact that, 2/3 of our population is really in rural India, I think that's what we really need to focus on. And the budget should really not only talk about giving us sops, giving us more money into schemes like Narega or skills, etc., but I think there has to be enough focus on actually getting these delivered on the ground, I mean, properly. I think that's the key really. To me, announcing more schemes, announcing more SOPs, looking or seeming to be pro-poor is one story, but actually getting it on the ground, I think, is a bigger challenge. And I would like to see more focus on agriculture, more focus on skills as well.
It seems almost unanimous, Sudhirji. Everyone seems to be feeling that this is going to be a budget that's going to focus on the rural sector, on farmers, and on agricultural distress.
Hope so, but if consider the presidential address to the joint session, that I am also hoping so. But when I go through this economic survey, then these hope belied, because there are the several predicaments that how we can correct the agricultural scenario or boost the rural sector. Just for this, economic survey writes, according to NSS data, the average annual income of median farmer net of production cost from cultivation is less than rupees 20,000. So when the farmer income is less than 20,000 farmer family income, so keeping the average family size of 5, so from all sources without consumption, it is total income. So I expect that in the budget, this finance minister will take care of the farmer income, not the productivity alone, because this government is considering or enhancing the productivity, but the current crisis is not the productivity. The current crisis is the what farmer is getting from out of this.
Okay, so farmer income, and keep an eye on that, is one of the things that ties up with what we were saying about rural demand also. There may be something in this budget for middle class demand and middle class income, especially if he goes ahead with the pay commission or OROP for that matter, some money comes in. But rural income and rural demand, that's something which is there. Dhirendra, your sense, let me get some opening thoughts, your basic view on what direction you think the budget is going to take.
No, surely this is a crisis, but I don't think it's a crisis to be addressed in the budget. This is a huge crisis when you have 2/3 of the population creating 1/3 of the GDP. Now this is a disconnect which has to be solved over a long period of time. And I don't think a course correction can be made by some policy announcement in the budget. Yes, right now we have this issue getting aggravated because of the monsoon failure in good part, or spending squeeze in some of the benefit programs. That's one part of it. But I think we are fundamentally far lower productive, and this has to be addressed in a different way.
Okay.
That apart, I think simplification, which this is one event in the life of the government, which was where we had huge expectations, because most other ministries, whether it be power, railways, the roads, ports, transportation, we hear a lot of stories of actual things happening. We haven't seen the simplification here. We haven't seen,
so you'd like to see a lot more coming up on actual simplification and ease of business.
Because this is actually the nerve center. I expect far greater simplification. I will be looking at directions where some few things getting abolished for the sake of eliminating discretion, working on principles. We know enhancing the predictability of the policy regime on this, because this is something where we have become very discredited. A lot of people say, yes, India shining, India, make in India, all this, but then say, but we'll see.
But the ease of business is still not, and I think Mr. Nyotia was also hinting at that. The ease of business still needs to be taken care of. I think that's an important point. I'll just come back to that in a minute. But Mr. Lakhotia, your sense, overall on the budget and specifically
overall
from taxation,
on the budget,
if you want to say.
The theme is, let us see 8 participants who is most happy. That will show that his game is going to be over this time. Fine, done. And I can see Mr. Nevatia, the FISCAL president, because even before the presentation of the budget, the government has brought out the presumptive rate for professional persons, for small businessmen, up to 2 crores income only 2 crores income, where they can declare the income. Businessman, small, 2 crore income, only up to 8% on the income and not keep books of accounts, details, vouchers, nothing.
No, so you're saying that to get all the money for the farming and the rural sector, industry is going to get it in the neck.
And then not only that, industry has already got under the Ishwar scheme or proposals,
Yeah.
the concept of long-term capital gains being declared for businessmen, no tension, no hassle. If it is more than 1 year shares, okay, take it. Big one, exempted. Only short-term capital gain will be up to 5
So
years.
you've just put your finger on one of the big concerns that I think, no one's actually looking at the stock markets out here very closely, but that's one big expectation from the budget that is causing a certain amount of concern. So I'll just come to that and then go up to some of the other themes that we are seeing. What he was just saying about the possibility of long-term capital gains, either the period being shifted from 1 year to 3 years, or even a tax coming in on long-term capital gains. That's got a lot of people nervous. You think it could happen?
If you read the Ishwar committee, which is printed on officially,
Yeah.
But here, Vikram, this long-term capital gains tax, if they bring this tax, it will again be a kind of, it will run against the stability principle, because this tax was abolished some years ago, and in lieu of that, they brought the STT, the tax on transactions, the stock market transactions.
But they can always say that we want to either increase STT or...
So it was actually, if this tax is brought, it will amount
Arvind,
going back on the earlier principle that was enunciated.
I think the tax part, I think the finance minister has said it last time, and as an overall vision of the government on the economic side has been a stable and transparent tax regime. So I kind of agree that I don't think so we'll see some knee-jerk taxes, new taxes suddenly being imposed, and a lot of...
And if we do, we're going to get you back in tomorrow and all shout at you.
I'll be there, don't worry.
Virendra, you think that's a possibility? I know people are being somewhat concerned about this.
There are two possibilities. One is that it's brought in, long-term capital gains will be taxed. But long-term capital gains taxation is not a bad idea, because any capital asset is indexed and then it is taxed. So if we get a roadmap, that's fine. There is another good part of long-term capital gains, that it drives a different kind of behavior. You have to see that what kind of taxation drives what kind of behavior. The impact of securities transaction tax is that everybody in the market has become a punter, because all that you are liable for, nobody thinks of buying stock for the long term. The long term thinking.
But the logic of a long-term capital gains tax not being there is that you should hold it for the long term, because then you don't pay the tax.
Yeah, you don't pay the tax, and making it 3 year or making it indexed, I don't think it is going to be as much of a problem. The only problem is with the active day trader, who will think that here was the convenience.
Does it mean that they should go back to the earlier regime where there was no STT, there was security transaction tax, and
STT in a sense dissuades the day traders, right? So to his point,
but STT over a period of time, what has happened is that this was the given. We exchanged STT for the long-term capital gains, and over a period of time, STT has been brought down to a level where it means nothing. It's virtually nothing. So and it has changed the market's behavior completely. And otherwise too, I feel that the government should be working on incentivizing long-term savings into the market.
Okay. I'll come back to that point, but Mr. Nyotia, before you leave us, the concept of ease of doing business, you referred to that, and it's been referred to later also, and I think Virendra put his finger in it. At the end of the day, that's one of the real cruxes of the problem right now, because after everything that we have had and said, and we must have non-adversarial tax regimes and ease of business and simplicity, and that may well be the intention of the government. But there is a view that is not completely filtering all the way down. We just heard Vodafone, for example, saying the intent of the government doesn't seem to be reflected by the tax department, which is a rather scathing indictment for a company like Vodafone to actually make. Is it your sense that after all that we have said on ease of doing business, there's still a lot more that needs to be done, and that perhaps one of the key areas that needs to be addressed immediately?
I think the tax departments, many of the suggestions that FICCI has made is also in terms of seeing that we do not have a very adversarial relationship between the client and the tax department. One, for instance, is that they ask for a certain amount to be deposited, which I believe is around 50% of their of the levy of the proposed tax, often it is so highly inflated which gets struck down at the tribunal at the first stage itself. So our recommendation was that at least in the first, up to the first level appeal, there should not be any need to pay advance tax. It should only be once you lose the first appeal and you go further, and that's the time when you should be asked to make the tax payment. This will give some relief to the people and the businesses can carry on. So, and there are various other issues also. So it is true that in the ease of doing business, sorting out the issues on interpretation of tax laws, there are many where there are contentious debates. They need to be, some of the fine print has to be sorted out and clarified. So number of things need to be done to see that we don't have problems of intense litigation and lots of things getting stuck in courts.
So there used to be a time, Mr. Neotia, when budgets were really looked, industry by industry, that this auto industry's tax is going to go up 0.5% or down 0.5%. And used to be, there used to be a lot of time that used to be done doing just that. Now, in the new environment, not so much attention is paid on that. So if you had to pick what you're going to be looking for, would it be that promised reduction in corporate tax rates or a roadmap for that? Or would it be some specific steps along ease of doing business as you just referred to?
The Finance Minister has talked about reducing the corporate tax rates and together with that doing away with certain exemptions. So if they can lay out the roadmap how this will happen, that will certainly help all companies in doing their tax planning and their future planning better. But having said that, the single most important issue that we would look forward is to see that the growth momentum is maintained, and therefore all those things that need to be done, whether it is in improving rural demand, whether it is in ease of doing business, whether it is public spending in infrastructure, whether it is targeting subsidies, whether it is disinvestment, those are the kind of areas that we look at so that the economy moves faster, and if that moves, I think the government will have more fiscal headroom to do a lot of welfare activities, and businesses will be able to grow and have profits to plow back for capital investment.